20-year-old Ibaga Stiwo is sick.
Oh, no! Oh, no! Brother, what would you now?
Monrovia.
Dying of Ebola is a brutal process, and for this man, a lonely one.
Facing the biggest Ebola outbreak we've ever seen in history. More than 2,000 people have died, and that's more than the total number of people who have ever died from Ebola since the first recorded outbreak in 1976. And the bulk of the deaths have happened within the last month, so things aren't getting better. There are a couple things that have helped this outbreak really spin out of control, and one is the fact that the response just wasn't fast enough. It wasn't until August that the World Health Organization declared this a public health emergency, and that was 5 months after the first international spread. In the past, Ebola outbreaks tended to be in really rural, remote areas, and this time it wound up in a border region in West Africa where people might cross the border for work or they might cross to go to the market. With that, you get international spread. This is a region of Africa that's never seen Ebola, so they didn't have the awareness about what this disease was in the population. These are also regions of Africa that have some of the lowest literacy rates, so that made mounting a public health information campaign all the more difficult. And there was fear, there was mistrust of health professionals. People in this part of the world are used to being cared for by their families when they're sick in the home, and in this case, they have to be ripped from their homes and put into containment facilities. And these are places that have some of the weakest and poorest health systems in the world. In some of the hospitals, there are days where they just don't have gloves, gowns, and masks. Because of this, there have been healthcare workers who've just walked off the job. They don't want to put themselves at risk anymore, and I don't know if you can really blame them. In Liberia, people are taking their family members to the hospitals, but they're being turned away. There are no free beds for Ebola treatment in the country right now. So as a result, Ebola is going back into the community and spreading further. We could look at this epidemic as a kind of warning that we need more robust global health systems, especially in a world that's increasingly connected. That's something that we don't have now, and that's one of the reasons why we've seen things get so out of control in this outbreak.
In the middle of London, a mass grave is unearthed.
Dozens of skeletons packed tightly together near key transport hub Liverpool rail station. It's a grim find, but at the same time an exciting one. Archaeologists suspect these are victims of London's most notorious and puzzling killer, the Great Plague of 1665.
We uncovered what is an open burial pit with at least 40 separate coffins placed in it, apparently all at the same time. They were stacked up and some even on their side. So it's a great candidate for a catastrophic event, and in all likelihood it could date to 1665 or one of the other 17th century outbreaks.
They're not the first skeletons to be found at the site, which was used as a burial ground for 170 years. The remains found here are of people who lived in the era of the English Civil War, Shakespeare and the Great Fire of London.
Oh.
The idea of using disease as a weapon gained a new level of sophistication in the early 1930s as nationally funded research programs on biological warfare were developed. The Japanese had a very active offensive biowarfare research program which included a battalion known as Unit 731. In their program, the Japanese conducted experiments on humans using 15 to 20 different disease-causing agents, with anthrax being one of their favorites. Allied prisoners of war and innocent Manchurian civilians in nearby villages provided an almost endless supply of experimental subjects. When word of Unit 731 leaked to the West, Allied forces began their own programs, concerned that Japan and possibly Germany would gain a military advantage in biowarfare research. The British conducted their first scientifically controlled BW field trials. Scientists exploded anthrax bombs near immobilized sheep to determine if the spores would survive an explosion and retain the ability to infect anyone nearby. Test results showed that anthrax could in fact be effectively dispersed by explosive devices.
North Korea's weapons capabilities may have gotten a little more menacing. South Korea's defense ministry revealed today that the North has 13 different kinds of bacteria and virus with short incubation periods in its biological arsenal. Seoul said that if used by Pyongyang, they would most likely be carried by aircraft, as the regime does not yet have the capability to fit biological weapons on missile warheads. Defense officials believe that anthrax and smallpox, diseases with high fatality rates, pose the biggest risk. In light of this, the ministry said it plans to acquire vaccines for both anthrax and smallpox in an effort to prepare for any biological threats from North Korea.
In February of 2003, a professor from southern China checked into room 911 at this hotel, then known as the Metropole. He was noticeable, other guests said later, because he kept coughing and spluttering. 2 weeks later, he was dead from SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. His one-night stay here had infected more than a dozen others, and some of them travelled on to other countries. In those 2 weeks, this city became the centre of an outbreak of a deadly but unknown virus, which went on to infect 8,100 people worldwide, killing 744 of them, and including 300 here in Hong Kong.
Moving on, health authorities in Saudi Arabia have reported a sharp rise in the number of deaths from the MERS virus as more infected patients emerge around the world. Paul, what exactly are we dealing with?
Well, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, is caused by a coronavirus that causes pneumonia-like symptoms like coughing and fever, and has been fatal in 1/3 of reported cases. Saudi Arabia's health ministry recalculated its number of MERS deaths on Thursday, following a review of figures going back to 2012. The death toll now stands at 283, with the latest fatality on Tuesday. The announcement came a day after the government sacked the deputy health minister, who had been criticized by international scientists for his handling of the viral outbreak.
China is battling a new and rapidly spreading respiratory virus. The number of people infected has tripled to more than 200, and President Xi says it needs to be resolutely contained. Now, the virus first appeared in Wuhan in December. The authorities say it passed to humans from animals at this food market in the city. But if it began in Wuhan, then there were cases recorded in Beijing, Shanghai and Shenzhen. We also know South Korea and Japan have confirmed one case each, and there are 2 confirmed cases in Thailand. 3 people have died from pneumonia, which has been caused by the virus. Well, we had this update earlier from the China National Health Commission confirming the virus has passed person to person and has infected some medical staff. We also heard from the spokesman for the China Foreign Ministry today, who called the outbreak an epidemic.
Now, officials in China think they know where the virus originated. And a warning, some of the images in this story are graphic. Here's Christy Lustow.
Barricaded and guarded by police with masks, Chinese authorities have traced a new deadly virus back to this seafood market in the city of Wuhan. They say a new strain of coronavirus originated here and put an entire region on edge. CNN has obtained this video filmed inside the market, showing that more than seafood was on offer for sale. Images of the market from early December taken by a concerned customer indicate it was apparently selling other live wild animals, including skinned birds, snakes, and raccoon dogs, sparking concern that the virus might have been transmitted from animals.
Now, a newly published paper strongly suggests, like SARS, the original source of this virus was bats. Scientists sequenced its genome, then compared it to other coronaviruses living inside horseshoe bats from eastern China. They found a close match, slightly different from SARS, but in the same family.
Now, a new study out of China suggests that endangered pangolins, a scaly anteater, are the most likely link between the coronavirus, bats, and humans. While initial speculation pointed to seafood, snakes, and other bat-borne coronavirus from Yunnan province in southwestern China, researchers from the South China Agricultural University have found that a genetic sequence of the virus from pangolins is 99% identical to the coronavirus.
As the world struggles to contain the new virus, a new speculation from the Chinese scientists who believe it may have originated at a research facility not far from the Wuhan fish market. While they say more research needs to be done to find solid proof, such labs are known to contain disease-ridden animals, including hundreds of bats. Our Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
Amid the continued spread of the COVID-19 virus, there's rising speculation the virus could have originated from a government laboratory in Wuhan, rather than the widely held belief that it emerged from the...
Well, the US says it's looking into what many have called a conspiracy theory. And there is a new report claiming that China sat on critical information for a number of days and that Beijing has been withholding crucial information. CNN's David Colville reports now from Shanghai.
At the start of the outbreak, this is where China directed the world's attention, suggesting that this Wuhan seafood market was the source of the novel coronavirus outbreak. CNN even traveled there just before the city locked down in January. Officials had shut down the wet market, and security told us to leave. U.S. intelligence officials tell CNN they are investigating another possible source, suggesting the virus may not have originated naturally as China has advertised, but rather that it possibly started in a Wuhan lab. Sources say it is one of many origin theories the U.S. is looking into. Chinese officials pushing back against that claim on Thursday, the foreign ministry spokesperson dismissing that the virus started in a lab, instead stressing that, quote, this is a scientific issue that should be studied by scientists and medical experts.
A year-old report had warned China of a potential coronavirus outbreak. And now in that report, Chinese scientists called for urgent countermeasures to stop such an outbreak. Our Ji-young tells us more.
It turns out a Chinese research team warned the medical world last year of the potential for the outbreak of coronaviruses from bats. The report, titled Bat Coronaviruses in China, was published in the International Journal of Viruses in March 2019 and said it was highly probable that future coronavirus outbreaks would originate from bats and it was likely to sprout up in China. In drawing up the report, scientists from research institutes, including the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China, collected information from past epidemiology studies on bat coronaviruses in China. The report said among the 3 coronaviruses identified over the past 2 decades, SARS, MERS, and swine acute diarrhea syndrome or SADS, 2 of them, SARS and SADS, first emerged in China. SARS and MERS broke out in 2003 and 2012 respectively and caused global pandemics that killed thousands of people, while SADS slammed China's swine industry in 2017. The research team pointed out that bats are important reservoir hosts for coronaviruses. They said bats are the only mammals that can fly, which allows them to have a longer range of migration compared to land mammals. Also, bats carry major alpha and beta coronavirus species that can transmit and cause disease in people. The report emphasized it was urgent to conduct more studies on bat coronaviruses in China, as the country is a hot spot in which another outbreak could occur. Researchers said another coronavirus could break out in China, as it's the 3rd largest territory in the world and the nation with the world's largest population. They said China's diverse climates and great biodiversity could spawn bat-borne viruses. The report also noted that Chinese food culture, where many Chinese people believe live slaughtered animals are more nutritious, could increase the chance of viral transmission. Ji-young, Arirang News.
What we did in this study was we looked to try to figure out, based on the genetics of the virus and what we knew about coronaviruses before this, where the virus might have come from. So one thing I can tell you is that this is not a bioweapon. Nobody made this virus in a laboratory. This is a product of nature. What we believe is that the virus, probably a long time ago, originated from a bat species, because there are coronaviruses of bats that are very similar to this new coronavirus, the SARS coronavirus 2. But there are other parts of the virus that look more like other animal coronaviruses. So what we believe is that this is a recombinant. So the virus combined from two different species to create a virus that is now infecting humans. Now, we don't know how long the virus was in humans. It could be just a few months, could be years, could be decades. But what we do know is that there are a few small changes that were made in the virus that allowed it to spread more rapidly.